On September 16, 2025, Breaking Defense reported that the Chinese Communist Party is actively courting Pacific Island nations, including the Solomon Islands, the host of the Pacific Islands Forum. Due to successful pressure from China, Taiwan, the United States, and Japan were excluded from the meeting, which was held from September 8 to 12, 2025. Before the Pacific Islands Forum began, President Surangel Whipps Jr. of Palau, one of the PIF member states, criticized Beijing's attempts to undermine Palau's leadership and weaken the public's confidence in its government. Speaking in Hawaii on September 8th, he pointed out that China had even sent drugs to the Pacific Island nation, trying to destabilize society. He compared this tactic to China's actions in the Golden Triangle region of Thailand and Myanmar, where it uses drugs, gambling, prostitution, human trafficking, and organ trade to manipulate local governments and control entire regions. From August 27th to the 30th, 2024, President Whipps Jr. also spoke at the International Military Law and Operations Conference, hosted by the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. There, he highlighted that Palau is facing economic coercion from China. Chinese investors had acquired long-term land leases up to 99 years in Palau, leaving the land unused in preparation for military purposes. Whipps Jr. stated that Palau is in a state of war with China and continues to face threats from Beijing. He emphasized that the best way to counter such coercion is by forming partnerships with like-minded nations. Why is China so eager to control this island nation in the Pacific? What makes it so important? Palau is an island nation in the Western Pacific. It consists of about 340 islands, covering a total area of 459 square kilometers, and is part of the Micronesian Islands. The country's economy relies heavily on tourism, and its maritime neighbors include Indonesia, the Philippines, and the Federated States of Micronesia. The region was first discovered by early Filipino settlers. In 1947, Palau, along with other Pacific islands, became part of the U.S. Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. Became fully independent in 1994 under the Compact of Free Association with the United States, maintaining a free relationship with the U.S. Palau is strategically important because it lies within the U.S. proposed island chain concept. The island chain was a military concept proposed by former U.S. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles in 1951. It divides the Pacific into three parts, namely the first, second, and third island chains. The concept was created during World War II, when the U.S. realized the strategic value of Pacific Islands for naval warfare, referring to them as unsinkable aircraft carriers. To solidify its maritime strategic advantage, the U.S. divided the Pacific into three island chains. So what does each island chain encompass? The first island chain. This chain includes the Japanese archipelago, the Ryukyu Islands, Taiwan, the Philippines, and the Sunda Islands. It stretches about 5,700 kilometers across the ocean, covering an area nearly 870,000 square kilometers. Key nodes within this chain include the U.S. military base in Okinawa, Japan, and the Yokosuka Naval Base. The second island chain. This chain centers around Guam, stretching from the Izu Islands and the Ogasawara Islands in Japan to the Palau Islands in the south, extending all the way to the Hachijo Islands. It covers a depth of 4,000 kilometers, serving as a strategic backup to the first island chain. Key U.S. military bases in this chain include Andersen Air Force Base and Apra Harbor Naval Base on Guam. Guam is a critical deployment point for the U.S. military, with over 20,000 personnel stationed there, and it's also home to the only overseas U.S. Air Force wing, the 18th Air Force. The third island chain. This chain primarily centers around the Hawaiian Islands, stretching from Alaska in the north to Australia and New Zealand in the south, forming a defense arc across the Pacific. Key locations in this chain include Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, as well as military bases in Alaska, like the Ilsen Air Force Base. The U.S. military in this chain mainly focuses on air defense, preventing potential adversaries from entering U.S. territory via the Arctic Circle and the Bering Strait. To understand the island chain theory, it's necessary to also understand the heartland theory. In 1904, British geographer Halford Mackinder proposed the heartland theory in his work, The Geographical Pivot of History. Mackinder argued that whoever controls Eastern Europe controls the heartland of the Eurasian continent. The heartland is often referred to as the World Island, which consists of Asia, Africa, and Europe. He suggested that whoever rules the heartland would dominate the surrounding peripheral regions and ultimately control the world. Therefore, the island chain theory is part of the U.S. strategic defense to prevent Eurasian powers from crossing the Pacific and threatening the U.S. homeland. In recent years, the Chinese Communist Party has attempted to break through the island chain's defense. In 2024, China increased its military presence in the South China Sea, and analysts believe that Beijing may be testing a new type of gray zone warfare strategy. The gray zone warfare strategy involves the CCP using non-military, quasi-military, or hybrid forces to create disruptions, such as those near Taiwan. For example, on January 4, 2018, the CCP announced the rerouting of the M503 flight path, which runs close to the Taiwan Straits midline. It goes from southbound to northbound, also activated 3 east-west connecting routes. This move was widely seen as civil aviation being used in what was originally a military or control zone, but it had significant political and military implications. The strategy behind this is that the Chinese military can use civilian flight as a cover to familiarize itself with the surrounding air routes of the Taiwan Strait, and in times of war, it can confuse identification by disguising fighter jets as civilian aircraft. This move broke the previous unwritten understanding between mainland China and Taiwan, effectively transforming civilian airspace into military use. On December 9, 2024, Reuters reported that senior security officials in Taiwan revealed that China had deployed nearly 90 naval and Coast Guard vessels around Taiwan, as well as in the East China Sea and South China Sea. Approximately 2/3 of these vessels were military ships. However, according to BBC China's review of Taiwan's Ministry of Defense's daily reports on Chinese military activities, it was found that in November 2024, the number of Chinese vessels was fewer than 10 on 25 days. On 17 days, government ships were monitored, with 1 to 5 ships each day. Between December 6 and 12, the number of Chinese ships significantly increased, with more than 10 ships per day. Between December 10th and 12th, the number of Chinese aircraft detected was reported to be 47, 53, and 34 sorties, which was a noticeable increase compared to the usual 10 to 20 sorties. So the 90 ships reported by Reuters was not really an exaggeration. Researcher Zhou Zhong at the China Strategic Foresight Institute told BBC Chinese that 90 ships is not particularly unusual. Taiwan's Ministry of Defense confirmed that this is the first time since the 1996 Taiwanese presidential elections that the Chinese People's Liberation Army has deployed military forces across the entire First Island chain. Taiwan's media reported that between December 9th and 11th, 2024, the Chinese military set up 7 airspace exercise reserve zones, extending a total of 1,000 kilometers east of Zhejiang and Fujian provinces. Officials in Taiwan's Ministry of Defense believe that this could indicate an attempt to impose a full blockade on Taiwan, sending a message that could turn the Taiwan Strait into internal waters. China's ambitions are not limited to Taiwan. Palau's president, Surangel Whipps Jr., angrily stated that Palau has been and continues to be threatened by Beijing. Due to Palau's proximity to Australia, the Australian government has taken notice. Mihai Sora, a Pacific affairs expert and former Australian diplomat at the Lowy Institute, said that Palau had long been at the forefront of China's coercion tactics in the Pacific. Beijing has weaponized Palau's dependency on Chinese tourists to apply economic pressure, and now transnational crime syndicates linked to China are becoming more active in Palau. Chinese developers are also purchasing land near U.S. strategic facilities, and the list of issues keeps growing. Sora noted that Whipps Jr.'s anger towards the Chinese government is not surprising. His conclusion is very rational. The presence of a strong U.S. military is vital to Palau's national security. Bethany Allen, the Australian Strategy Policy Institute, pointed out that now is the time for Australia, the U.S., and other like-minded nations to respond to Palau's calls, showing that there are trustworthy partners who respect the needs of Pacific Island nations. President Whipps Jr. also accused China of pressuring Palau to sever ties with Taiwan. He stated, "Sometimes we need to look beyond money. We have to look at what is good for the safety and security of our people long term." He emphasized that Palau would not be bought off by China's money. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that in recent years, the Chinese Communist Party has been expanding its influence in the Pacific. They use intimidation, economic coercion, and other means, which undermines regional peace, stability, and prosperity. Taiwan has strongly condemned the CCP's attempts to coerce Taiwan's diplomatic allies to shift their foreign policies. On February 16, 2024, Cleo Pascal, a researcher at the U.S. think tank Foundation for Defense of Democracies, revealed in a post on X that Palau's president has sent a letter to an unnamed U.S. senator. In this letter, he stated the urgent need for U.S. aid under the Compact of Free Association. Whipps Jr. shared this post on X. Pascal pointed out that the letter, sent on February 9, 2024, described China's proposal to Palau to sever diplomatic ties with the U.S. and Taiwan. The offer included promises from the CCP, such as committing to fill every hotel room in Palau's tourism sector, with more bookings if more hotels are built. The letter also stated, "Our islands enable the U.S. to exercise strategic control over the waters and airspace between Hawaii and Asia, including its maritime routes that China covets, effectively extending U.S. military borders into Asia." Whipps Jr. highlighted that Palau also provided land for U.S. defense needs. The U.S. military has deployed missiles and early warning radar systems in Palau to monitor Asia. He emphasized that no other U.S. ally is as close to the U.S. in the region, which is why a U.S. military commander referred to Palau as part of U.S. territory. Whipps Jr. warned that unless the U.S. Congress approves COFA aid, China would take advantage, and pro-China elements within Palau would succeed in accepting China's seemingly attractive economic offers. However, the cost of these offers would be a shift in alliances, beginning with the abandonment of Taiwan. The COFA aid refers to U.S. financial support, defense protection, and immigration privileges provided to Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau. The letter mentioned that China had proposed spending $20 million annually to operate a tourism customer service center on a 2-acre plot of land in Palau. In August 2024, Taiwan's government supported Whipps Jr.'s statements, highlighting that China is weaponizing tourism to force Palau to shift its foreign policy. This is not the first time Whipps Jr. has raised this concern, showing that small island nations face economic bullying from powerful nations. Taiwan empathizes with this and continues to provide close cooperation with Palau in areas such as fisheries, healthcare, tourism development, sports exchanges, education, culture, marine conservation, and maritime safety, all of which are welcomed and recognized by Palau. In contrast to Taiwan's aid, China is exporting crime. The Prince Group, founded by Chinese businessman Chen Zhi, has recently invested in several resorts, real estate, and infrastructure projects in Palau. This group, one of Cambodia's major enterprises, has been accused of involvement in money laundering, online gambling, and internet fraud. The CCP is using such criminal organizations to invest in land development in Palau, aiming to undermine Taiwan's diplomatic relations. In response, Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Xiao Kuang-wei, affirmed during a media interview that the CCP's criminal activities are being exported to other countries. Xiao emphasized that Taiwan strongly condemns these actions and urges democratic partners to recognize the unlawful tactics of authoritarian nations. In light of China's aggressive stance on the South China Sea, U.S. President Donald Trump has made strategic adjustments. On September 16th, Trump visited the United Kingdom and delivered a speech, signaling his intent to seek loyal allies in Europe and counter the anti-Western alliance. Clearly, the UK is one of those loyal allies. Trump stated that the US would work with the UK to develop AI technologies to combat China, and also develop new nuclear energy sources to support AI technologies that require large amounts of power. This would provide a solution for Europe to reduce its dependency on Russian energy. Trump specifically mentioned plans to reclaim the US Air Force base in Bagram, Afghanistan. That base is close to a Chinese nuclear weapons production facility. In 2021, the U.S. military withdrew from Afghanistan and abandoned the Bagram base. Dennis Wilder, former CIA expert on Chinese military affairs and a current professor at Georgetown University, stated that Trump was likely referring to a facility in China, located in the desert of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. That nuclear site is called the Lop Nor nuclear test site, where Beijing has long conducted nuclear tests. The flight distance from Lop Nor to the Bagram base is about 2,000 kilometers, which modern Chinese aircraft could cover in about 1 hour. Bagram base has a 3-kilometer-long runway and was the starting point for U.S. military operations throughout the Middle East. It has enough space to transport planes, fighter jets, and attack helicopters. This move demonstrates that Trump is not only focused on the Pacific, but also paying attention to the Middle East. However, Wilder also mentioned that China has never produced nuclear weapons in its western region, with nuclear weapons production facilities located in central China. From a strategic perspective, the U.S. may plan to target China from both the eastern and western fronts. Chinese leader Xi Jinping hopes to modernize China's military and break through the Pacific Island chain. Will this dream be realized? The renowned U.S. think tank RAND Corporation has provided an uncertain answer. In a 2025 report titled Factors Shaping the Future of China's Military, RAND noted that China is rapidly aging, a trend that will reshape Chinese society and economy, and will also weaken the PLA's recruitment ability and long-term modernization strategy. The report indicated that China's population peaked in 2020 and is expected to decline significantly by 2030. In 1990, China's population under the age of 18 was approximately 400 million, accounting for over 35% of the total population. By 2030, the youth population is projected to fall below 240 million, making up only about 20% of the population. The population aged 50 to 79 is expected to exceed 525 million, accounting for 33%. RAND Corporation predicts China's population will still be about 1.2 million by 2030, although some Japanese research institutions argue that China's population currently stands at just 1 billion. In 2023, the Chinese government officially acknowledged the reality of population decline. This shift indicates that China's society is experiencing a reverse pyramid demographic change. In 1990, there were 2 young people supporting every 1 elderly person. But by 2030, it will transform to 2 elderly people for every young person. The decline in the youth population has led to a shrinking recruitment pool for the military. Urban youth show less interest in military careers. The PLA may face the dilemma of modernizing equipment but lacking personnel. RAND concluded that the proportion of young people in China's population is increasingly shrinking, while the CCP is striving for military modernization. If high-quality recruits cannot be obtained, the PLA may have to reassess its strategic objectives and possibly adjust its pursuit of Western-style joint operations. The impact of an aging population on the military is severe, as Japan's self-defense forces have experienced. China's youth population is not only shrinking, but the health situation is also concerning. Reports show that, in recent decades, obesity rates among children have surged, as has the incidence of asthma, with boys experiencing higher rates than girls. RAND pointed out that building a modern military requires economic support, but the COVID-19 pandemic, which began in late 2019, has severely impacted China's economy, and there are serious issues in the banking and real estate sectors. China's economic elite continues to move funds overseas. While China's pension and healthcare systems have improved, they still lag behind other countries, including less economically developed nations. Additionally, government corruption, social unrest, and inequality may drag down China's full economic growth rate. If China cannot maintain strong economic growth, it will struggle to escape the middle-income trap, making it even more difficult to become a relatively wealthy country. The plan for a strong military will remain far off.